Hello everyone, this is Fred Yamunga from Integrity Business Services, and I'm recording this video for eTraining Pty Limited. And what we're recording today, the name of the webinar is Identify and Control WHS Risks. This is part of ensuring a safe workplace. And in order to start our webinar today, we want to talk about what's the purpose of this presentation. At the end of the session, we want you to know how to develop a hazard management procedures. We want to include hazard identification in all your planning stages, how to develop and maintain control procedures, how to identify inadequacies in existing risk controls, and identifying requirements for expert WHS advice. So let's begin and let's see where we go. So first thing we're going to look at, say, how do we establish risk management procedures? So the first thing is risk identification. You need to identify the risks that are in that workplace, maybe construction place, could be factory that your organization is involved in, manufacturing or warehousing. Identify what are the risks there. And then you've got to analyze those risks to determine the level and nature of risk. Could be very extreme risks, could be maybe very low risks. So an analysis has to be done on those risks that have been identified, and then evaluate those risks to identify the acceptability. Some risks might be, hey, this is too high risk, we need to change the equipment or we need to change the system. Some risks will be, well, you know what, we can do some interventions by training our people to overcome that. And some risks we might have to get a third party, maybe insure the process. There are risks that we might have to say, you know what, we have to live with this. But now, how do we ensure that at least we minimize that risk for the benefit of our workers? So that's what goes into establishing a risk management procedure. And then when you talk of the hazards, we have to identify, say, what types of hazards exist in the workplace. Your hazards could be physical. Maybe if it's a warehousing, you got forklifts going back and forth, you got shelving, and you got a lot of heavy equipment that is piled up in different places, and maybe slippery floors in terms of kitchen and all those entertainment places. Maybe there are psychological hazards, physiological, mechanical hazards, operating equipment, machinery, chemical hazards. You could be dealing with a lot of fumes and chemicals that are hazardous to your health. That if you don't use masks when you're in the factory, you could inhale, could be dust or some of those factories. So these are some of the hazards that have to be identified and written down, and maybe sources of energy and environmental hazards. Identifying these hazards and writing them down and then listing and say, how is each hazard or each risk then being treated? Now, so after having identified those hazards, we now need to find methods that can say, how do we audit these hazards, the process that we put into place, what sort of consultation, what methodologies do we need? And then you've got to review some of the incidents reports. You go back and to say, what do we have listed in the previous years, or what has been recorded as hazards? Some of those might not be seeable by the eye, you cannot be identified unless when you begin to run the process of actually manufacturing and doing the job, then the hazard can be identified. So looking back into those meeting reports and the incident reports of the previous years helps you identify what could happen. And there's also just job safety analysis that can be done to identify the hazards. And some of the hazards are embedded in the planning and designing. That's where it can be identified. And so when we analyze it, let's do an analysis of our risks. How frequent are these things take place? What's the severity of these risks? Is it moderate? Is it high? So if this happens, what impact could it have to the business? If this happens, what impact could it have to the health of our workers? If this happens, probably on the bottom line, uh, how is it going to affect your profits? How is it going to affect your production processes? And so you analyze now is you come up with a risk matrix where you can say, is the impact moderate? Is it severe? Is it something that can take human life? Or is it something that we should completely avoid because based on the matrix, it's not doable? So a lot of organizations will probably hire, risk managers to look at that and study it together with your WHS specialist. And when you evaluate those risks, they can be put into different categories. Organizations, some of them will have different levels, could have level 1, 2, 3, and some big, large global organizations even have levels going up to 25. Um, all those risks are put into blocks and they're described differently. So, and you might have some risks probably they're just potential, but they need to be controlled. And there are some risks that you might say these are medium. That means they're likely to happen, but if they do happen, the impact will be higher. And you have some that are regular, that could happen at any time, but the impact is less. So hence, you need to categorize them, you need to evaluate them, you need to have a matrix and how you're going to deal with each of those risks that have been identified. And then you come to determine the control. There is what is called a hierarchy, the hierarchy of risk control. It is very important, it's very key in WHS because you come up to certain risks that you can eliminate. So if you can eliminate it, identify it as this, we can eliminate it straight away. Organizations will work and say, how do we eliminate it altogether? And there's some you might have to use substitutions to say, all right, this is the risk, or what is the equivalent, what else can we substitute with? And there are some that can be through engineering, that means work around them, find an alternative, find options to, go around that risk. And there's some that are administrative, like training. You identify a risk, say, well, in order for this not to happen or to minimize it, they need to be regular training, awareness being brought to the employees. And there's some risks that you got to have PPE, that means use the protective clothing. So it could be in the kitchen, that's why, putting hair into the food, they can wear those hair masks. Construction sites, people have protective clothing, helmets and boots, and all those comes under PPE. That means that kind of risk can be controlled, can be administered effectively. So after you've done that, then organizations go, like we spoke earlier, monthly or weekly review the risk control to say which one is working, which one is not working, is our administrative in terms of training working properly. You look at your feedback reviews. You also look at your statistics of incidents. Has it been reduced? If the statistics tell you that nothing has been reduced, you look and say, is this the risk that we try to eliminate, or is this the risk that we used an engineering process? Have we found a real lasting solution to this, or is this something that we might have to live with, but to try to minimize as much as we can, and looking maybe for better technology to overcome that. So your risk controls now, some of them need to be assessed periodically. And in order to take prompt action, there is a planning that is constantly ongoing in organizations regarding risk. There is new technology coming on the marketplace regularly that helps you keep your workplaces safe. And generally, organizations will seek WHS advice from specialists. They'll go to the Fair Work Act Australia to find for, latest advice. They talk to unions, they talk to statutory bodies, they talk to employer associations, they talk to the industry associations, insurance companies, technical advisors to help them on how to keep their workplace safe. And obviously, lastly, when we conclude this, the whole idea of identifying risks, of looking at all the metrics that we have and the risk controls is to ensure that the workplace is safe, is conducive, is encouraging, that the workplace raises good morale, that your workers are happy to come into it, and they can come with full confidence knowing their workplace is safe. And so, as we conclude this, again, we encourage you to do your self-paced activities. We encourage you to read your student workbook, your learner guides, and all the PowerPoints and the extra materials that you have put there. And there could be some other videos that help you understand WHS processes. Thank you very much for listening. We encourage you to keep us posted with how you're proceeding and how you're doing, and we'll love to hear from you. Thanks very much, and we keep us posted. Ciao, ciao.